Okay, we are live.
Okay, hello everyone. So today we're going to talk about negotiations and some techniques to improve our negotiation skills. So has everyone seen Taken? Okay. Well, it's over 10 years old, so it's spoiler free. Basically, when we face a negotiation, the first perception is that there are two parts or more that have different positions, and they struggle to come to an agreement. And well, basically, this picture is a bit of extreme on that part. Hello. Do you listen to me?
Yeah, now yes. Now
yes. Does everyone listen to me? Or?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay,
yes, we do.
Okay, perfect. So in this scene, basically, there is a guy pointing a gun at this old man that is holding his daughter with a knife. So it's a bit of extreme, but we get the idea. Two positions that seem that can't ever come to an agreement. And well, if you've seen the picture, you know what happens here. I hear myself with an echo. Is someone using the speakers? Sorry, but okay. So basically, when we start a negotiation, there is one thing that we don't want to do, and that is arguing positions. See, it's not what we want to do because it will produce bad agreements. If you say, for example, my house it's worth $100,000 and the buyer wants to pay $50,000, you are not going to get to an agreement if you stay in that position. It is most likely that you will end up splitting the difference or something like that, and that's probably not the best approach for any part. It's not efficient because it will take a lot of time until you can get to an agreement. It can put the relationship between the parts in danger. You are probably going to say things that you don't want to say, the other part too. It will start getting personal, and after the negotiation, maybe the relationship with the other part will be damaged. And if there is more than two people negotiating, it's even worse because every part has its own position. And if you think that being nice during the process could help, well, it won't, because what will happen there is that the other part will run over you and you will lose everything, basically. So what should we do instead? Basically, we're going to speak about the win-win methodology. It's the negotiation method that Harvard teaches in its business school. And it has 4 different, there are not phases or steps, there are just 4 different guidelines that we should follow. And you will see during the presentation that they overlap. It's not that you have to do one part first, then the other. It's not a process, but a guideline. So you should separate people from the problem, focus on interests, create several options, and base your results on some objective standard. So the first is to separate the people from the problem. You are negotiating, so you are dealing with people. And everyone there has their own interest, and those interests are always split between the essence, that is the thing you are negotiating about, and the relationship. you have a relationship with that person and you want to keep that relationship, and you don't want to damage that that relationship, but those things can get mixed, and the idea is not to do that. So what we want to do is to separate the people from the problem. In every situation, there are different perceptions, and that's where Nietzsche comes in. There are no facts, only interpretations. So everyone sees this the same in a different way. So what you think it's the problem and the cause and the solution of the problem, it's not what the others are seeing. And to understand that, you should practice active listening, which is actually listening and then maybe rephrasing what they said and try to make sure that the other part sees that you are listening and understanding their point. And of course, this comes with empathy. You should try to put yourself in the other's position. So that's very important because it shows the other part that you are listening and you are understanding, and that will most likely lead to them to be to do the same with you. They will start listening and putting themselves in your position. So the next guideline is to. Sorry? Is there a question?
I think we're fine.
Okay. So the next guideline is focusing on interests and not impositions. So here we have an orange. And imagine there are two guys fighting over the orange and who gets to keep it, okay? They argue for a while, and in the end, they decide to split the orange in half, and each of them take one of them. After all that, they realized that one of them wanted to eat the orange, and the other just wanted the peel to cook a cake. So if they had discussed why they wanted the orange, they could have realized that maybe the one that wanted to eat it could have eaten the whole orange, and the other could have get the whole peel. So both of them end up losing because they didn't understand what was the interest behind wanting the orange. So it's a very basic example, but it's good to illustrate this part. So behind positions, there are interests. So why do you want that? Why do you say that? Why don't you want to do what I want to do? Okay. And those interests could be shared and compatible, as in the case of the orange. If they had discussed that, they could have found out that they could both get the whole orange. Or they could be opposite, and that's where you need to negotiate and start discussing. Each part has its own interests, and even if there are more than two people in the negotiation, and more than one part shares a position, maybe they don't share the interest. And to find out what are the interests, the best approach is asking why and asking why not. Because why don't you want to give me the orange? What do you want the orange for? And based on those answers, you'll start understanding what the other part really wants and what the other part really cares about. And also ask yourself why and why not, because the others might be saying something that it could work for you too, and maybe you could discover an alternative that you didn't think of before. Also, analyze consequences. What would happen if we do certain thing? So if we, instead of splitting the orange, we peel it and take everyone could take what they want. Would that be better than original proposition. And finally here, the basic needs are the most powerful interests. So this is, I don't know if anyone heard about the Maslow pyramid of needs, but this is basically what's behind of everyone's interest if you dig enough. So you're looking for security, you're looking for economic welfare, recognition, and control of your own life. So in the end, every position could be mapped to one of these basic interests. So the best thing you can do about this is speak about your interests and be concrete. Let the other know what your problem is. There is an example in the book that says that there were trucks from construction that were endangering kids that attended to the school that was in the next block. So parents wanted them to build a fence for trucks to come out of the construction site only through only one part of the street to keep the children safe. So they went to the construction manager and said that they wanted to do that. If you start saying, I need you to build a fence, the first thing that the construction manager will think about is the cost. And he will start thinking about how to respond to your demand instead of actually listening to you. But if you start saying, hey, there are lots of children walking around your construction site, this truck can cause an accident, some of the kids can be hit by a truck, so why don't you build a fence? Doing that will get their attention, and they will, if the first thing you said is the problem, they will listen to it because they will be expecting what comes next. They know that you're going to demand something, but if you start with the problem, by the time you get to the demand, they will have to acknowledge that there is a problem and we should discuss it. It's not like you're inventing something or you want something just because. So that's a really good way to get their attention and actually discussing the problem. The other part also has interests, and they are part of the problem. Maybe with this example, building the fence is too expensive for this construction. Maybe it's just they're building a square and they don't have money to build a fence because the work will be ended in a couple of weeks, and that cost it's not acceptable for them. So that's fair, and that's a part of the problem, and that's a part of the should be part of the discussion. So always recognize the other guy's interests. Also, the idea is looking forward. You can't change the past. So what can we do today to solve this problem starting tomorrow? Discussing the past, it's not worth it. It can feel like a personal attack. And the best thing here is just moving forward. Also being concrete, but flexible. Maybe you wanted the fence, but the other party may say, okay, a fence is too expensive. Maybe I can put 2 of the construction workers to lead the traffic at the time kids enter and exit the school. So that could be a solution. It's not what you had in mind, but it can work, and it also keeps the other part's interest. It also works for the other part's interest because it's not as expensive as building a fence. So that could work, and you should be open to that kind of propositions. And finally, always being hard with the problem and soft with the people. So you have a problem. The problem is you are afraid that the truck might hit your kid when he gets out of school. But the other part actually doesn't want your kid to get hit by a truck. They just have another interest, and he could also be sharing your interest because they don't want a truck hitting a kid either. So he's not the problem. The problem is that you need something to protect kids from trucks in this case. So hard with the problem and discuss everything around it, and don't leave the table until you know kids will be safe, but don't attack the other part if they don't just comply with your demands. So far, any questions? Am I clear? Anything you want to discuss? Okay. So before making a decision, you should create several options. And you should do this before going to the actual negotiation. To create options, one technique could be brainstorming, creating several ideas without evaluating them until you have finishing brainstorming. And starting with that, you could then start discussing what of those ideas are actually feasible and you could do, or they could apply to this problem. Side note, I believe brainstorming is a good topic for a future talk. So, okay. Then is expanding the options. And here you have 4 things you could do. The first is to do an iterative approach. So you have a problem. That problem could be caused because different root causes. Then from there, you could move on to how would you ideally fix those root causes? And then the next step is, okay, so what can I do tomorrow that to go that way? And if you do that into several iterations, you could arrive to some possible solution to the problem you're discussing. Other approach is asking experts of different matters, what do you think about this problem and how would you solve it? And take their input into account. Another approach is try different intensity agreement. What is this? For example, you want to do a permanent change. You want to, for example, change the working hours. So we want to start working instead of 9 to 5 from 10 to 7 or 10 to 6. And you discuss that with your bosses and they say no. And maybe a good approach is saying, okay, why don't we try it for 2 months? Instead of being a permanent change, let's try it for 2 months and see how it works. So you are probably getting what you want, and you are giving the other part the ability to evaluate the results a little bit afterwards. And then you could start negotiation again. So after 2 months, you get together again and say, okay, what happened? How are we doing? Did it work? Did it not? Should we change? Should we make it permanent? Another approach here is a change of scope. We were discussing yesterday this with Matthias, and he gave a good example for this. Let's say, for example, you want to change a library in a really big application, but your manager says, okay, no, this is too risky. We have a production release near in the future, so I don't want to risk to do this. Okay, so let's not do it in the whole application. Let's do it in just one module and see what happens. it's you change the scope, it's the risk, it's less, and you could try what you want to do, because if you are suggesting this, most likely you have a valid point to do that, and the risk for your manager and for the team and for the project is not that big. Also, you could create mutual benefit solutions. It is possible that some of the interests are shared, and some of them will most likely not be shared. But for example, going back to the construction site example, both parts agreed that they didn't want a truck hitting a kid, but their proposed solutions were different, and there were interests that didn't match because the construction manager didn't want to raise the costs. So focusing on that, they recognized the problem, that their shared interest is of avoiding trucks from hitting kids, and they proposed the other solution of having some workers leading the traffic at the time kids were on the street. And that way they could focus on the shared interest and match the opposite to get to a solution. And finally here, there might be several options, and it's perfectly valid to ask the other part what they prefer. So if with their input, it is better to get to a solution. And you should help them to choose, and you should work for that. For example, you should know who will take the decision in the other part, and you should understand how they see the problem and what's in stake for them. For example, if you propose to the other part to delay a release for a month, what would happen? What's in stake for the other part's project manager? Will he get, for example, fired for the delay? How are things on the client? Also, and this is important, people want to feel that they are doing a legal, fair, and honorable choices. So don't propose things that put them in a position that they have to lie to their bosses, they have to hide what you are doing. So try to be fair and keep everything you do legal and honorable. Also, search for precedents. If you are, for example, asking the other part to do something or to take a decision similar to others that he has taken before, and you want a similar outcome, you should say, hey, in these previous events, you went this way. So why not doing it again? So people want to feel they are consistent, and this will help. If you make a note of similar previous decisions that are similar, they will probably go that way. And finally here, no one wants to feel they are losing. I mentioned before that this was the win-win approach, but not every time all the parts will win. So if possible, you should offer the golden bridge. It's like the honorable exit. For example, a hostage situation here. There is two guys that assaulted a store. The police came, they are surrounded, they are in there with some hostages. And they know it's over. They know they can't run away. They know they will go to jail. So what happens here? They start asking the police for stuff. For example, pizza and cameras, TV cameras. And it is often thought that they want the cameras to make sure that they won't get shot by the police. But to be honest, well, at least I believe police officers don't want to kill anyone. Yeah, we're watching the news, but let's try to think police officers don't want to kill people. And why do negotiators agree to that? Because they know that giving them the pizza, giving them the TV cameras will make it easier and safer for everyone when the kidnappers get out and release the people. And why do they want that? Because these guys know that in prisons, and they are going to prison, inmates watch TV. And they want to be seen as the guys that made the police give them food, and to the guys that held hostages, and they want to look tough in front of the other inmates when they get to prison, because they know that if they enter with that background, they will be more respected than if they just surrender. So that's what they're looking for, and that's their golden bridge. They want respect in prison, and that's why police negotiators give these things to them, because it will result in a better exit of the problem. And finally, you should always think what would happen if the other part, if they choose what you want them to do. If I tell the other part project manager, for example, the client's project manager, hey, I'm not going to release this today. I will do this in 1 month. What would happen internally to him? What would his boss tell to him? And you should think about that, because that's a good way to understand the other part's interest in the discussion. So the last guideline, the results should be based on some objective standard. Maybe you are negotiating the price of your car. You want to sell your car. I say it's worth $1,000. The other part wants to give me $800. Who's right? So what should you do there? Maybe check online what similar cars of the same make and model and year are worth. How much are they asking for that car? How's the car condition? Is it broken? Is it working? The buyer will have to fix anything. Maybe you should try getting 2 different mechanics to put a price on the car. And the idea here is to get to a criteria that it's not the desire of any of the parts. It should be independent from them, and it should be fair. You could call someone to do some arbitrage in the negotiation. You could go to an external reference. You could call experts, wherever you think it's valid to evaluate the situations, independently from any of the parts' will. And if you can't get to an agreement about the price, what you should do is try to get to an agreement about the process of getting to the price. So do we agree of reviewing some car selling pages on the internet and get the average price, for example? Is that fair? Should we call both our mechanic and see how much they think the car is worth, and maybe split the difference, something like that? Those are valid options. And finally, what happens if the other parts are more powerful? Let's go back to the car example. I need to sell the car. I need the money. The other part could buy my car or could buy another one similar. So in this situation, he's the one who has the most power. And what should I do? I should know what's my best alternative to a negotiating agreement, okay? What's the best I can do on my own if we don't agree in this negotiation? And that's something you need to know. And that's the criteria you should use to see if what they propose is good for you, okay? For example, in the car example, you know there are lots of car dealerships that buy your used car to resell it, but they pay less than if a private buyer that you can negotiate with. So how much are they offering? If I know that a car dealership is offering me $850 for my car, and the other part is offering 800, should I take it? Because I know I can do better. And that's the alternative of using or thinking of an acceptable minimum. If I say I won't take less than $900, is it why? Okay, because that's the objective criteria. I know that someone will pay 850. So everything above that, it's a fair agreement. And maybe it's good for me because that's what I can do on my own without this negotiation. I started with an image from Taken, and I'm finishing with another image from Taken. Do you remember this scene? This is when her daughter is being kidnapped, and he starts talking with the kidnapper. And he says, release my daughter. And if you don't, I have a series of skills that I get over my life experience, wherever. I will find you, I will hunt you, and I will kill you. So this is his best alternative to negotiate an agreement. That's what he's doing. I said, if we don't agree here, this is what I can do. And I thought it was pretty graphic for this, and everyone understands, at least understands that meme. So it's I thought it was a good one. Okay, finally, the other part has their own banta. So you should know that, and that leads to the idea that it's okay not to agree and stop negotiation. Because if you came to a point where the best you can do is worse than the other part's banta, okay, stop agreement. You won't get to a deal, and it's fine. Okay, and don't let your daughter go to Paris alone. Okay, just to finish, some recommended readings. Getting to Yes, it's the book that explains everything I just said. It has a few more chapters discussing what happens if the other parts won't give up their position and doesn't want to discuss interests and stuff like that. It's good. It's the authors are the one that built the system in Harvard, and it's a really interesting book. There is another one by one of those authors that is Getting to Yes with Yourself, that basically helps you to prepare for the negotiation. It's all the internal process that you should go through before actually going to negotiate. And finally, there is a book that it's called Start with No, that the previous one were Getting to Yes. This is Start with No. Why? Because this guy thinks that if you do what I just said, and the other part is not thinking the same way, and they just want to run over you, the method, the win-win method, could lead you to try to get to an agreement always, no matter what. So this guy says, okay, watch out. If you want to get to the best possible agreement, take care of with this, and this, and there are several recommendations of stuff that you shouldn't do if the other part is not actually acting in good faith. Okay, so now I'm done, and if you want to ask questions.
Hello.
Yep.
I do have a question. I just wrote it in the channel. You just talked about the best alternative to an agreement, the banter, and the weak position. I was wondering if during a negotiation, your best alternative should be made known to the other part when you are the strong part. If that's better, or if you should not mention it and only mention your best alternative as the last card. You know, how do you handle that?
Well, it's not math. You should decide in the moment, because it can improve your situation in the negotiation, or it could lead to the other part to close and stop negotiation. Because if they believe that you are too strong to get to an agreement, maybe they will leave. So you should assess that in every negotiation and decide as you go.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Pablo, I have a comment about the last slide you presented about the other one, the last one. Yeah, that starts with no. There's an interesting concept about that, because the other books about the concept of getting to yes sometimes could be a problem when you're trying to negotiate with someone else, because normally if the other part doesn't want to get involved in the discussion, they could say, okay, yes. Sometimes the yes, it's not saying that the other part agrees with you. It's just about they don't care about the discussion and they don't want to discuss. So they should say yes to like get out of the problem, the discussion, and keep with their stuff. The interesting part about the no is that sometimes saying no when you are trying to negotiate something, you're making a point. You're like, at some point you're taking the command of the discussion. You say, okay, this is my limit. I don't want to do that. So now it's me who is putting the limits, who is trying to define what we are discussing. And that's that's even harder than getting the yes, because the yes could be like, okay, yeah, I don't care. Let's keep talking about something else. But the no, it's when the other part gets involved in the discussion, and you make them feel that they are in control. So there's a super interesting concept about that, which is I just sent a book, which is Never Split the Difference. I really would like to include that in the recommended readings. And there's a complete chapter about the word yes, master no. The yes could be I mean, at some point it's not realistic. It could be a wrong idea of what you're getting from the other part. The really important part is when the other part gets involved and put their limits. Then you can start understanding what they are willing to accept or no in what you're discussing. So it's really, really important, the no in the discussion.
Yes, and one of the first things this guy, Jim Camp, says is that if you need, for example, to renegotiate and you have an offer, you should tell the other part, if you don't agree, just say no. And asking them to say no actually forces them to take a decision. What he says is you want the discussion to be about or the process to be about decisions and not emotions. So giving them the choice or not even giving them, asking them to just say no if you don't agree, forces them to decide. And that's how the negotiation moves forward. So it's interesting because he doesn't say that the other approach, what we just discussed, it's wrong. It says it could lead to unfair agreements or the agreements that are not the best for you. So saying no and taking control or asking the other party to make a decision actually can lead to a better agreement in the end. So. Mm-hmm.
Great talk, Paulo. What other questions do we have for him?
Not actually a question, but more like a comment. So I think it's, of course, you need to have your strategy before you get into a negotiation, no matter what. And during the bargaining process, is sometimes you need to be flexible and adapt, and sometimes it's like a good card game. You never have to show your hand because the other person negotiating can read your intentions and lead to maybe a disaster for you. So it's an interesting game, a side game when you're negotiating. And I think the most important part is that you need to be flexible and adapt during even the bargaining, because the other person can change their approach as well. And I think the other important thing is that is to be aware that you always have the chance to say no and to leave the negotiation if it's getting to a point in which you are not going to be able to get the end result that is positive to you.
Yes, I agree, but hiding your cards can be also dangerous, because you want to get to an agreement based on interests, and those cards you are hiding are your interests. So it depends on what you're doing, and that's what this guy Shin Kamps says. But according to the method, to the win-win negotiation method, showing your cards should be the best approach, because you are being honest with your interests and you're trying to get to a fair agreement. And that's why when I recommended this book, I said maybe the other part isn't being fair. So what to do in those cases. But if you are negotiating something with a part where you want to keep the relationship open and you want to continue to work with that person, maybe hiding your cards, it's not on your best interest in the long term. You should evaluate that. It's not something that could be recommended as a rule, but maybe you should think about hiding your cards or not, because in the end it might lead to a problem in the future.
Yeah. There's no single approach to negotiating. In some cases you have to, if the win-win, thinking about that a 50-50, but if you want to get a 70-30, sometimes you have to maybe try to influence or change the process to get in that results that you want. So, but again, there's no single approach to negotiating, and it depends on the situation. And sometimes you can't negotiate if it is just about following a process, a procedure. Maybe about deadlines, time to deliver, etc. Yes, but if it has to do with following a procedure to the letter, there's no negotiation possible.
No, of course, and that's why I said that these were guidelines and not a procedure, because this is what, if you do this, you should come to a good agreement. But of course, it's not science, it's not math.
Good.
I have a comment regarding what Sergio was speaking about recently. So I also agree that you should always sort of show your cards. And I heard this I was watching an interview from the guy who wrote Never Split the Difference. And the guy was saying that he often got away with what he wanted in a negotiation, because whenever he wanted money, he wouldn't tell the other part I want us both to arrive at the best possible intersection of our interests. He said, I'm greedy. I want as much for myself as possible. And when he tried to bargain aggressively, that worked out to his favor, because the other part couldn't say, oh, this guy is secretly greedy and he's trying to take advantage. The other part says, okay, I understand why he's doing this. He warned me at the beginning, and so I know that he at least didn't try to lie to me or to sort of be dishonest. I know what he wants, and maybe he doesn't walk away with 100% of the pie, but he walks away with 70%.
Yeah, and that's his interest, and that's why it's so important to make them explicit, because that's her interest. What's your interest? Are they compatible? Can you work it out? Is it fair for everyone? If he takes the money he wants, what do you get? Do you get what you need? Do you get what you want? Do you get what you're expecting? And because those are your interests. And if not, what's the best you can do if you don't give him all the money he wants? And that's why it's so important to know the banta. It's, okay, this guy wants a lot of money. Can I give him a lot of money? Should I give him a lot of money? What's the best I can do with that money if I use it in some other way? So it's okay if the guy starts saying, I want money. Okay, that's his interest. There are probably some hidden interest behind that. Why does he want that much money? Is it fair for him to take that much money? What's an objective criteria to measure this agreement? He wants this much. Should he get this much? How would I pay? What would I pay some other people? What's the average outcome of this operation in the industry? So there are several things you can do to say, okay, you deserve this money, or you don't. And you know what? With that money, I can do all of this other stuff, which works for me, and it's cheaper, for example. So yeah, it's valid. No.
Right. Yeah, I was talking about why you perhaps want to be completely honest and not hide your cards, because then the other person knows what to expect. Oh, okay. So they're a greedy bastard, but at least I know that that's why they're doing it, and that I don't mistrust them because they're not lying to me, even if I say, oh, well, they're greedy.
Okay.
Great. Is there any other questions for Paulo? I go with one, Paulo. First, okay. I think that this kind of talk is great. Like I think we should try to develop more like our soft skills. It's not only about like negotiation about money or something like that. Like as the examples that you placed. For example, like we are full with micro negotiation when we are dealing with the sprints and try to see what kind of features do we place, like what kind of trade-off do we take, like to try to make it to the timeline like in a good shape. So I think this is great. I hope we can have other talks like this. I was like thinking on something about how to proceed when the other side, imagine that you like learn about all these negotiation techniques and try to like focus, not focus on the person and the position of the person to try not to attack it, and you are trying to follow all these rules, but on the other side there is someone that is very bad at negotiation. Like what do you advise to do? Like I imagine that you cannot send this presentation to them because they are going to be like feel a little bit bad. Like how do you proceed in that situation?
You should try to push them to this scenario, because the most likely approach they are taking is making it personal and attacking you. So the best thing you can do there is not taking it personal, but taking that they are mistaking the problem with your person. So if they attack you, you should say, okay, so I understand that you don't see the problem the way I do. How do you see it, for example? And try to lead them to talk about the problem. So that would be the basic approach.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, this is not only about how good or bad it's the other part of negotiation. Yeah, I mean, in that case, at some point, you have some leverage because probably the other party is not that involved in this stuff. But as Paulo said, it's super important to understand the situation from your part and make them feel like you're in their shoes. It's what makes the difference. Once you get that and the other part starts feeling that and trusting on you and saying, okay, this guy understands my position, the theory says that everything should be easier from there. And actually there are some techniques to do that, like labeling or asking, the name is like calibrated questions to start understanding what's their position in the negotiations, so you can get they can start trusting on you, and from there everything should start being easier. But again, that's the theory. Each case it's totally different, so that's a good technique, I think.
Yes.
Cool. Well, thanks a lot, Pablo and everybody, for the discussion. Great talk, and see you next week again.
Okay, see ya. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.